What's up, closers? This is Kevin.
This is Ryan.
This is Becca, and you're listening to the Close of Business podcast,
The one and only STEM podcast for young professionals.
When the company laptops close,
the beer's open,
And the conversation flows.
all of this and more happens.
at the Close of Business.
Oh, I'm getting better at that. Welcome back, closers, to episode 33 of the Close of Business podcast. Today's episode is going to be on space. We've got a stellar interview with Bruce Betts, the chief, how do we say it, Becca?
Chief Scientist.
Chief scientist. Okay. At
The Planetary Society.
Thank you.
He has been focusing on a project called the LightSail. The Planetary Society, like we mentioned before, CEO is Mr. Bill Nye, the science guy himself. It's a crowdfunded company where it's not for profit. It's only driven by donations. Bruce will explain exactly what the Planetary Society's missions are in the interview. And he talks a lot about what solar sailing is, because that sounds absurd. It's a cool new technology that they just had a successful mission of here within the past month or so, pretty recently, if you guys saw that in the news. He describes the technology, what it is, and the science behind it, and kind of what they're wanting to accomplish with solar sailing.
Welcome back, everybody. We're sitting down with Bruce Betts, who is the chief scientist and LightSail program manager for the Planetary Society. And I want to give you a quick opportunity here in a minute or so to explain what the Planetary Society is and what LightSail is. But before we do that, I have some icebreaker questions.
Okay.
And these are actually just more personal, urgent questions. Do aliens exist? Have you guys ran into an alien yet? I saw you had a photo of a UFO on stage, right?
He made a joke about aliens being in one of the photos.
Well, there was that picture with the alien, but
but no, you can't confirm.
wait, are you recording?
Yeah.
Oh no!
It's out there, people. Now we know.
So for a borderline serious answer, yes, they're aliens. No, we haven't ever discovered or contacted them, and so I don't know they're there. But
Okay.
Statistically, it makes sense.
It makes sense. I agree. Is the moon made of cheese?
Yes.
Okay. Can a cow jump over the moon?
It's challenging. Maybe with a catapult.
With
Okay.
a catapult. Okay. What's the deal with Pluto? In your opinion, is it a real planet or is it a fake?
It's interesting, no matter what. Wait, are we talking about the object or the dog? The dog.
The dog's cool, but we're talking about the object that's
Okay, the object. It was. It probably needed to be demoted. It's once you find other objects out there, the question is, in 15 or 20 years, do you want to have 30 or 40 planets that kids have to memorize, or are you going to cut?
We can increase
Cut
the
down.
length of the acronym and the mnemonic devices in order to remember the planets. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Inclusion? I don't know.
is that the dogs eat soggy? No, okay. Yeah, I don't think Pluto deserves to be a planet. It's just kind of like too far away, and that's a little bit lazy in my opinion.
But it's very interesting, and as with so many places we visited, a lot weirder when we actually got there than anyone expected.
This is kind of a serious one. Do you think you will ever have the opportunity in your lifetime to travel in space?
No.
Or do you
No.
want to?
Obviously, he wants to.
I totally wanted to. I'm a little less certain now.
Damn. Okay. We'll get into that.
But if you get me a ride, then I'll debate.
You'll debate.
Okay. Noted. Well, yeah, we'll get that set up.
So,
You have that power, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I'll call somebody.
we
Okay.
well, you know Bill Nye, right?
I work for him.
You work for him. You have his number in your phone.
Maybe.
At the end of this episode, do you think you could text him and be like, "Hey, I went on this really cool podcast. You should do the same."
No.
Oh,
Sorry.
You could at least
he's
humor
honest.
us.
At least he's honest.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want me to not be honest? Yeah, I'd be happy to. In fact, I'll just call him up and try to convince him this is the greatest podcast
I'm going to
ever.
edit out the first part, and
And
I'm
then
only
we're
going
gonna
to
do
keep
that.
that. No, I'm just kidding.
We
I'm
want our
just kidding.
listeners to think that Bill Nye listens. Okay, so anyways, briefly go through your background and how do you become chief scientist?
Chief scientist.
Yes.
You have to say it right.
Yeah.
Chief scientist.
Oh, there you go.
That was good.
How do you
There you go.
become?
The route I took was doing math and physics in undergrad, and then getting a PhD in planetary science from Caltech. And
wow, that's oh, sorry, Caltech is obviously a really prestigious. So cool, you're legit.
my undergrad was at Stanford.
You're even cooler than I thought.
My elementary school was Caleb Greenwood.
Oh my God! Stop it.
You should. Yeah, that's the greatest school that ever existed. That you're
Totally.
highly pedigree.
I couldn't get in.
What a pedigree.
Yeah. Okay. So
Anyway, then I did some planetary science research, but you see, the key was my PhD was with Bruce Murray, who was a Caltech professor and former head of JPL.
Okay.
And Bruce Murray was also one of the 3 founders of the Planetary Society. So I did slave labor for the Planetary Society when I was a graduate student. Went and did science, went off and did a temporary stint at NASA headquarters, and then they called me back into the fold, and I've been there ever since.
Can you explain briefly what the Planetary Society is for those who don't know?
The Planetary... What? There are people who don't know.
I know, sad, right?
disappointed.
All right. The Planetary Society is the world's largest space interest group. We have over 50,000 members in over 120 countries. We are a nonprofit, and we do a variety of things. We do planetary science education, including a podcast, Planetary Radio, and and also a website. We do science and technology projects, like LightSail, our biggest ever, and we do political advocacy for space exploration.
Very cool. And LightSail would be the main focus of this interview, but what other do you have a couple other really cool projects that you guys are working on that you're allowed to talk about? Or just mention, I guess?
Yes, I'm allowed to talk about everything. We do everything we do is public and supported by members.
Okay, cool.
And donors. So we have supported projects tied to planetary defense. Planetary defense.
Yeah, is that the Space Force? Stormtroopers is what
you mentioned there are aliens, and now you're saying we're defending ourselves from those aliens that are coming. So now everything's out there.
Dang it.
Yeah, gotcha.
Where's the delete button?
Yeah.
No, but seriously, folks, we do asteroid defense. So protecting the Earth from impact by an asteroid or a comet.
Didn't just recently a comet came in between the moon and Earth, and it's like scary close, and we had no idea, or was that a lie?
Not a comet, but an asteroid did do so, and in fact, a few do every year come between the Earth and the moon, and so we live in a cosmic shooting gallery, and so the question is not whether there will be an impact,
no,
but when.
Don't tell me that.
But there's hope. It's the only preventable large-scale natural disaster. So
how is it prevent? You're going to zap them?
Well, that varies. The first thing is to find them. And so you have to find them, you have to track them, figure out their orbits, figure out what they're made of, their size, their scale. And then if you have one that's going to impact Earth or has a significant percentage, then you try to do a deflection. You probably deflect it, change its orbit rather than destroy it.
How do you do that? What kind of equipment do you use?
There are various options. So one of the most thought about. Yeah. Actually, you can hear kinetic impactors in the background if you listen carefully. Kinetic impactor is a spacecraft that you basically slam a spacecraft into the asteroid to change its orbit, and you can hit it with multiple spacecraft. And all you need to do is get it to change its orbit enough to miss Earth. And
isn't that kind of what Bruce Willis in the space movie? He shot himself in an asteroid or something? No, okay.
Well, I don't want to ruin the terrible movie for people.
Was it? Okay.
I mean, the highly realistic.
Yeah, right.
No, really, at asteroid conferences, you can't get enough Bruce Willis jokes.
Yeah.
There are asteroid conferences?
There is. We are a primary sponsor of the Planetary Defense Conference, which occurs every 2 years. It just occurred in Washington, D.C. a few months ago, and it will be in Vienna, Austria in a couple of years. And it brings together all the world's the world's experts in all aspects of the problem. So everything from finding, tracking, characterizing, deflecting, and then also international cooperation and education and coordination, which is something we work a lot at.
And Bruce Willis jokes.
Yeah.
And Bruce Willis jokes.
It does.
Because they never get old. No, seriously, what you do do if you find a dangerous asteroid is you find old oil mining people and you send them to the asteroid with nuclear weapons, because that makes sense.
Yes. Okay.
So there are other techniques you can do. The key is having a long time frame to work on it, because then you don't have to blow it up. You can just gradually nudge it, whether it's a kinetic impactor or even a gravity tractor, or use the little tiny gravity of the spacecraft to very slowly tug the asteroid off course. But if you're out of time or it's too big, then you probably would go with a nuclear option, either to disrupt, blow it up, or to vaporize one side of the asteroid and create a jetting that moves the rest of it. We also have sponsored another technique which gets back to your saying zap it, which is a early phase development, a concept of using lasers to vaporize rock and then create jetting.
Sharks with laser beams is what you would...
Well,
Sharks
sure.
with okay, it's an Austin Powers quote. I didn't know if you would...
Oh, sorry.
You're hitting him with all these
all right,
quotes.
yeah. We got... Man... I personally want to hopefully interview you again, because I've just got rabbit holes I want to go down. But I want to we want to talk about LightSail,
right?
And because LightSail's, especially recently in the news, one of the most notable. It's in space right now. Like literally, it's probably right above us. We could wave and it would see us.
Okay, there were several things wrong with that statement, but let's move along.
What is LightSail?
LightSail is a program of the Planetary Society to fly a solar sail spacecraft in a CubeSat. So in other words, a spacecraft that is propelled purely by the pressure of light from the sun, and it's in a very small loaf of bread size spacecraft that deploys a shiny mylar sail that's about the size of a boxing ring, 32 square meters.
What is the pressure of the sun? Like, do you know, like, and I mean, obviously it has to be a huge sail in order to have an impact, or is it because it's in space and you're not dealing with a lot of like friction or what do you call it, drag?
Yeah,
you don't need that much pressure, and does it build infinitesimally?
That's basically exactly what it does. So the disadvantage of the technique is your acceleration is very, very small compared to like a chemical rocket. The advantage is it just keeps accelerating, and you continue to get that push from the sun, and as opposed to chemical rockets that burn for a couple minutes and then you just coast, here you actually can utilize the push from the sun.
And can you mechanically move the sail? So like, you know, depending
how do you control it,
right,
essentially?
So there are different options for different sails. Because we're testing this out, our goal is to do controlled solar sailing in a small spacecraft, a so-called CubeSat.
Yeah.
And so to do that, and to do that as inexpensively as possible, because this is completely citizen funded, we got a launch to Earth orbit. And so we actually control it using magnetotorquers, which are basically use the Earth's magnetic field, not something you could use in interplanetary space. To do small adjustments, you use electromagnets to push against the magnetic field in the way you want. And then we have a momentum wheel, which is a potentially fast spinning piece of metal that you adjust its speed, and then you get a rotation around one axis of the spacecraft. And that's how twice in orbit we rotate 90 degrees. So we go face on to the sun for half the orbit and get pushed, and then edge onto the sun when we're coming towards the sun and don't get pushed. Or at least that's ideally what we try to do, and we kind of mostly sort of do that.
Can you describe what the actual LightSail looks like once it's out in space and it's fully in orbit and all of the booms have been fully extended? What does it look like? So
it looks like that little loaf of bread spacecraft right in the middle of a bunch of shiny mylar. There are 4 booms.
What are mylar?
So it kind of looks like space blankets, kind of, or like foil is kind of what it looks like.
Birthday balloons. The balloons are usually made of mylar. Ours is a thinner mylar, and it includes what are called rip stops, to threads to keep it from ripping.
I was going to ask.
Ripping. And so we have 4 booms that are basically like fancy tape measures, and they are attached to 4 triangular pieces of mylar, and they extend outward from the central spacecraft using a motor. It takes about 2.5 to 3 minutes. Okay. And once they're out, they're out.
And you also have solar panels on the back of the...
We do. So our spacecraft, the actual box, is covered in solar panels on the inside and out. The inside, we deploy some solar panels, look kind of like little wings
What type
out the side.
What type of modules we talking?
What type of what?
What kind of modules?
Cool modules.
Do you know the manufacturer?
Of what?
The modules.
The solar module. He builds solar farms, so he's really into solar panels.
I didn't want to dive down.
Yeah, he's really into it. That's what.
Well, what's your favorite company? Okay, well, whatever it is, that's what we bought. That's what they are.
They bifacial.
Gesundheit.
Okay.
Bifacial. They have a single face. I'm sorry, I'm not well versed in these solar cell technologies. So basically, they have one.
On the one side.
They're on the one side.
Got it.
And they're attached to the outside of the panels.
Yeah.
The 4 panels that deploy upwards.
Yeah. Nobody listening to this podcast really cares. I was just interested.
so
I'm sorry, I can get that answer for you, but we acquired them so long ago. I don't recall the vendor.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
So the LightSail is fully deployed. It's orbiting Earth. What exactly is it doing while it's up there now? Is it collecting data? Is it taking photos? What are you utilizing it for?
We are using it to do exactly that. We're trying to, right now we're working on improving that control mechanism. Mm-hmm. So the turning it 90 degrees twice in orbit, trying to keep it truly face on, truly edge on. And we're dealing with issues with the momentum wheel and trying to keep it from what's called saturating, reaching its maximum speed. We've uploaded different software to do that more efficiently. Mm-hmm. During the process of it, we get pictures and download them when we can, including for others and us to evaluate the sail and the performance. So basically we're trying to, at this point we've had our formal mission success. We've raised the orbit, the high point in the orbit, the apogee, about 6.5 kilometers now using solar sailing. So we've demonstrated we can do it. We can shove a big sail in a tiny box and deploy it and use it and control it. So we're trying to do it better, and then eventually the perigee, the low point in the orbit, it drops. It will dip into the atmosphere enough. Still what we consider space, but when you have a little tiny spacecraft and a big giant sail, there's a lot of atmospheric drag.
Yeah.
And so it will eventually be dragged in and
fall out. Yeah. What is it about conventional spacecrafts that you think LightSail will change? Like, why is there a need for LightSail?
It enables missions that you can't do, or at least very hard to do with other technologies. So I don't think there's no one perfect solution. It depends on what mission you're flying. And so solar sails are conceptually quite good at certain things. So for example, you can, right now we have solar monitoring spacecraft at the Earth-Sun Lagrange 1 point. And so about 1 million miles, 1.5 million kilometers towards the sun, there's kind of a gravitational balance point, and they detect solar storms. They give warning to Earth, but it's a very short warning. You can actually put the solar sail farther inwards towards the Venus orbit and balance the forces so that you stay between the Earth and the sun, but you aren't using any fuel to do it.
I think it's crazy that we're just monitoring. I mean, it's obvious, but we just have a spacecraft out there like, hey guys, the sun's acting up, watch out.
We have multiple spacecraft because the solar storms, if they coronal mass ejections throw a bunch of particles and they're actually headed our way, they can disable spacecraft. They can actually cause major issues with power grids on the surface of the Earth. If you have enough warning, they can disconnect the grids ahead of time. And so I don't know the details of it, but that's an example of a sail mission where not having to use fuel and balancing forces, you can do things. You can also do asteroid flybys, say, where you launch and you can just keep going to multiple asteroids, changing your orbits over time, because again, you don't need fuel. And what we're trying to demonstrate is you can do it even with these very small spacecraft, which are very common for Earth orbit. These CubeSats, universities fly them, agencies fly them, that you can actually use them interplanetary and hitch a ride on a mission going to Mars or Venus, and then separate and then fly your own missions relatively inexpensively because your spacecraft is so low mass that you can hopefully piggyback.
What do you think's the maximum distance in which, like, I guess the pressure from the sun is diffused? I don't know how pressure works in space. That's kind of, I guess it's the pressure of the photons hitting the sail, right?
Right. So it falls off as 1 over r squared, the distance from the sun squared. It's basically distributed in a sphere to go slightly techie for a moment.
But until then, it's continually accelerating, right? Because
it's just accelerating less as you get farther from the sun.
Yeah.
So you can operate in practicality probably out to Jupiter, certainly out to Mars, but you can do other creative things where you actually head in towards the sun and then turn and head out away from the sun again with a higher pressure from the sun and reach higher speeds. You can also eventually use lasers on Earth or in space to get it up to much higher
beam
speeds.
It. Yeah.
So I read somewhere, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that I read somewhere that stated that LightSail or solar sailing could have a greater propulsion than like typical spaceship jet propulsion, faster than that. Is that true?
So yes, it is. You can theoretically reach very high speeds, including just from these techniques of heading in towards the sun. And it's gradual, but then you're able to really harness the higher thrust from the sun and push yourself to higher speeds headed outwards. But also this is the theoretically off in the distant future a potential way to go interstellar. And there are a lot of issues in figuring that out, but with high-powered lasers, you could conceivably accelerate one of these to a very, very, very high speed and send them out of the solar system.
So I guess a lot of the applications that you were talking about are related to planetary defense, like utilizing the sensors on LightSail to figure out where asteroids are, monitor the sun, things like that. Are there any other applications or like missions that you want to utilize it for later on?
There are other things you can do. One weird application theoretically is you can establish pole sitters at a planet, and so where we have like geostationary satellites that hang out way out over the equator and stay over one point at the equator. You can actually balance forces theoretically over a pole of a planet and then have continuous coverage and monitoring of the polar regions of a planet, which now you can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, not without multiple spacecraft.
Yeah.
I guess you said it's the size of a bread of loaf, or I talk at sucking, so is there a proportion?
Hear you, I do.
A loaf of bread has X square meters of size. Can you get larger than a loaf of bread, or does it at some point it become infeasible to use the sail technology at a certain size of an aircraft or spacecraft? Excuse me.
That's what people are trying to figure out.
Okay.
And so it's an engineering challenge. So the key with solar sailing is area divided by mass. So the area of your sail divided by the mass of your spacecraft is correlated directly to the acceleration you will experience at a given distance from your light source. So if you make a really big sail or a really small spacecraft, this is good.
That's good. Okay.
And big spacecraft, small sails, bad.
Have you ever thought about just sailing a loaf of bread in space instead of a spacecraft?
Oh, have I ever?
But what kind?
No one listens to me.
What kind though? It has to sourdough.
Whole wheat.
I mean, yeah.
What would you bagel?
Well, I think that would be a public contest to determine.
That's true.
I'd probably go sourdough, but that's just it's
you let the people
preference.
who donate to the mission
exactly
decide. That makes sense. That's
well, which
logical.
bread would you want aliens to theoretically pick up and eat?
True.
I would want them to pick up one of those really grainy, seedy things so that hopefully they hated it.
Yeah, and they're like,
wouldn't come and bake.
Nothing here, guys.
Man, their food's but it's really healthy.
Yeah.
Let's try the next system.
But Dad, I'm hungry. Okay. I think that's maybe a good place to wrap up. We don't want to take any more of your time, but if ever in the future you think if you enjoyed this experience, I'd love to have you on just to talk about like general space, because
Sure.
It's something we're
this is
very
incredible.
curious about. And
Incredible.
We want to learn more about.
But it's, we don't want to open a whole wormhole of
Well, I got nothing.
yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening today, guys. For more episodes, you can now catch us on iTunes or anywhere you find your podcast at Close Up Business Podcast. Make sure to get on there and give us good reviews and share your episodes with your friends and colleagues. And for social media needs, you can now hit us up on Instagram and Twitter at COB Podcasts. And be sure to follow us so you can get all the alerts for our new episodes and check out what we're up to. If you shoot us an email with questions or comments, you can do so at cobpodcast@gmail.com.